Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer. For this video, I take some of the most overpowered weapons and make builds for them that do great damage and offer variety. I've added in a few of the obvious ones while also throwing in some newer ones as well, keeping it a fun video based on some of the more overpowered options in Elden Ring. Before we continue though, be sure to check out the description for 20% off of G Fuel. You can support the channel as well through the links. Here we start with our Blasphemous Pyromancer build, which mixes the use of fire incantations with the always great Blasphemous Blade. This is a powerful option, and we'll be taking on a variety of side bosses and main bosses for this video. As you can see here, we crushed the tree avatar, which takes additional fire damage, and we're going to work on what basically amounts to an NPC type invader enemy, which this does a lot of damage to. And if you make contact with the Blasphemous Blade, you get extra damage from the physical portion on top of the fire damage. Godfrey Golden Shade is generally an easy fight, but the Blasphemous Blade and Giant's Flame Take Thee make it even easier. It's an amazing spell to throw in with the most overpowered weapon in the game. You're always healing back HP with Taker's Flame, the Ash of War, while also being able to throw fireballs for even more damage and range. This is an easy number 1 on the list, and although I didn't rank them this time around and just kept it at 8 random fun and overpowered builds, this is by far the easiest to handle Elden Ring and make it an absolute cakewalk. The Blasphemous Blade definitely fits a Pyromancer build well too, because of the fact that you can basically go high faith, invest very much into your faith stat, because the Ash of War scales purely with your faith stat, and then you can use different fire incantations to mix in and to have a lot of power from that too. And as we take down Golden Shade, we're going to be going over equipment stats, everything you need to know for the first build that's on here. There's actually 9 in total. There's going to be an extra bleed build on top of the one that I have in here, and let's get into the equipment now. For the easy mode build, we have the Blasphemous Blade plus 10 preferably. You can run 2 seals or a giant seal in the offhand, Knight's Cavalry Helm altered, Black Flame Monk set, Phlox Canvas Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Fire Tier, Faith Tier. Let's get into stats for this one. For stats, this is really straightforward. By the way, we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, Giant's Flame Take Thee as well was the main one that I was using as far as incantations. Burno Flame is excellent with this too. And we have 80 Faith, only 16 Strength because we're two-handing it. But if you want to do a single-hand Blasphemous Blade, I think you'll need 23 Strength, 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, and then we have 27 Endurance for a well-rounded Pyromancer build. The second build we have is the Great Stars build, which is the definition of a bonk build. This focuses on jump attacks in combination with the Ash of War Craig Blade to easily posture break even the toughest of bosses. This is a personal favorite for strength, and you could even put these on a Colt for more bleed and solid damage if you go for an arcane build. Be sure to try out this epic build on whatever boss you're facing. It's guaranteed to be an absolute beatdown. As you can see, we knocked out the Gargoyle here in K-Lid. He's usually generally on the tough side. We are on New Game plus 7 for all of these builds, of course. That's max scaling. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have 2 heavy Great Stars, plus 25 preferably, with Craig Blade on them. We have a random set of armor. We hit over 51 poise, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Claw Talisman, Green Turtle Talisman. We have the Stone Barb Crack tier and the Faith tier. Let's get into stats. For stats here, by the way, you can see that we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. We have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 30 Endurance because it's a decent amount of weight, 70 Strength because we're in heavy affinity, minimal Dex, only 7 Intelligence. We have 25 Faith with the Faith tier, and then you don't need really any Arcane for this build, so you can have whatever your base Arcane amount is. The third build on this list out of 8 is the Scavenger Curved Sword Dragon build. This mixes in jump attack bleed power of the Scavenger Curved Swords with any dragon incantations you choose from. If you go with my exact stats at rune level 150, you'll get great damage while getting to 339 scaling with the Dragon Communion Seal. The Faith tier will get you there, and all in all, it adds up to a powerful bleed build that can crush the toughest of bosses. On top of that, dragon incantations can be powerful too, and can make the game easier once you get a hang of the casting times. Here, I finished off Morgott with Glintstone Breath, one of my favorites. In a second, we're going to go over stats, equipment, everything you need to know for the Scavenger Curved Sword Bleed build, of course, with the ability to use dragon incantations on the Dragon Communion Seal as well, with a little extra investment in faith on top of the arcane, and we're going to get into equipment for this build. For equipment, we have 2 Scavenger Curved Swords on a Colt with Seppuku on them. We have the Dragon Communion Seal for the Dragon Incantations, White Masked Raptor's Black Feathers, anything else that gets you to 51 poise, Claw Talisman, Rotten Sword Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. Let's get into stats for this one. And for stats here, we have 60 Arcane. We got to 35 Faith. By the way, the soft caps are 45 and 45, but I wanted to lean more into Arcane for the occult damage on the Scavenger Curved Swords, but we hit 35 Faith with the Faith tier to give us 339 scaling on the Dragon Communion Seal. By the way, we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength. We have Glintstone Breath as well. We have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 26 Endurance. Overall, this is a well-rounded build. We're going to show off here in a second another build that you can do with these identical stats. That's a really fun bleed build too, and basically same stats, almost same setup. Build 3.5, using the same exact stats as the last one, is a Bloodblade build for the Scavenger Curved Swords. By just changing a few talismans, you can add some range bleed to your build. This is a solid addition to any seppuku based build and is great against most of the bosses in Elden Ring. The Fire Giant is of course tough, but that really doesn't matter too much when you're able to proc bleed consistently. New Game Plus 7, which we're on for this entire video, he has over 63,000 HP and can be a bit of a pain. That being said, it's relatively easy to get the procs on him with Bloodblade. I like the Ash of War Bloodblade due to the fact that you can put it on any weapon of your choosing, which in turn adds to the variety of the overall build. This can be changed easily by switching a few talismans, and if you wanted to, you can add in dragon incantations just like the last one too, to basically add to the variety more so. If you want to add things in like Glintstone Breath, Fire Breath, all that stuff on top of this build, you'll still have that same 339 scaling with the Faith tier. That seal will boost them, dragon incantations that is, by 15%, and it also ends up being the second highest scaling for seals, only behind the Golden Order seal. Between this and the last build, based off the same stats, you should probably be able to find the variety you're looking for in a bleed build. You'll have that option of doing the jump attack bleed stuff with seppuku and whatnot, and then you'll have the range bleed of Bloodblade just by changing a couple talismans. You can kind of run a mix of the two as well and get a lot of bleed build up and a ton of damage. Yeah, the variety here, see, the Reduvia is a dexterity and arcane build, so you have to invest in two stats primarily, and you don't lose HP, so it is a solid option. But the thing about Bloodblade, the Ash of War, is you can put it on a curved sword, and then you can put it on something like even the Nagakiba, starting katana, etc. You have a lot of options to use for Bloodblade to give you that variety that the Reduvia just doesn't offer because it's a short-range weapon. Especially if you're going for the contact damage too, I really have to recommend the Nagakiba. If you get up close, you get more bleed and more physical damage, and the Nagakiba has nice range when you're using Bloodblade for even more damage. Definitely a cool one to try out, and I like the fact that I added on to it too. I threw in the standard Scavenger Curved Sword, awesome bleed, jump attack build with seppuku, and then you have Bloodblade too, where you can just go for the range bleed. By the way, if you're using Dragon Communion Seal and you have really high scaling, you can also throw in Swarm of Flies too, which will give you additional bleed at a range to make the build even stronger. Let's jump into equipment for this one. For equipment, we have the Scavenger Curved Swords, one with Seppuku, one with Bloodblade on Occult because we're arcane focused again, Dragon Communion Seal, White Mask, Raptor's Black Feathers, Claw Talisman, Rotten Sword Insignia, Shard of Alexander for Bloodblade, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, the Thorny tier, the Faith tier. Let's get into stats. And once again, we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength again. And any dragon incantations that you want, we have 60 Vigor, the same, 21 Mind, 26 Endurance, and then we have 60 Arcane, 35 Faith with the Faith tier. The next one up here is the Bubble build, likely the most meme build and the funniest of the bunch. The Bubble build is rooted in, well, bubbles. You see, dragons fear bubbles as their large stature and size makes them easy targets to take down using the Envoy's Longhorn. Seriously, by the way, you can see there's just two casts. Two uses of the Ash of War, and we're able to do a massive amount of damage to the dragon in the Altless Plateau. It's just incredible how much damage you can get against the dragons because they're so big with the Envoy's Longhorn. Let's get new equipment. For equipment, we have the Envoy's Longhorn plus 10. We're using the Erdtree Seal plus 10. We have the Bubble Helm on. We hit 51 poise. Flox Canvas Talisman, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, and then we have the Holy tier, Faith tier. Let's get into stats for this one. For stats, it's a very easy and straightforward build, much like the Blasphemous Blade. We have 80 Faith because our Ash of War will scale purely with your Faith stat. We're using Golden Vow and Hellish Shiburi as well. We have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 27 Endurance, and once again minimal Strength so that we can two-hand and use the Ash of War. which can do a ton of damage to larger targets. Now for a medium-sized target, I'm going to show you another clip here on how good the Envoy's Longhorn truly is. By the way, everything's timestamped in the description below to make life a little easier. This is a really fun one, and whether you're new to Elden Ring or have been making builds since launch, there's no denying the sheer fun of running the bubble build. By the way, if you've been following to this point, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button too if you want more overpowered builds, and if you want more fun builds too. I've been doing some cosplay builds and different types of things lately, trying different things out, so if you're interested in that, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button. This Elden Ring video, for this one, we definitely focused more on the overpowered stuff. Some of the stuff was kind of obvious, we just changed up a little bit. For me, these are the builds that I'm running lately to make life a lot easier. That's why I wanted to put this video together, to make Elden Ring a little easier and have fun with some of the overpowered builds. The next one up here is the large axe build using Brogot's Roar. This is a powerful one that can proc rot while doing massive damage. Roars can certainly be overpowered, even if they're a bit slow. They're highly damaging on the alternate charged attacks, while also being reliable for strength builds. They can be super fun to land too, and the Rotten Great Axe is a solid choice if you want to do a roar build. Status effects are multiplied when using the attacks after the roar, so getting rot procs is more likely than ever when using a build like this one. Yeah, this is definitely a fun one for me. I enjoy this because it can be a little challenging at times to land this. It does take a little bit to get used to those alternate charged attacks that the roars have because they have long wind-up times, but when you land them, you get that status effect multiplier and you get a lot of damage too. I don't know the exact math, but I think it's like 3 times what's on the weapon itself. You can see the rot proc there upon the hit, and then we're going to be able to finish off the magma worm with a critical hit because you get some good poise damage too with the special charged attacks on the roars. And I like the Rotten Duelist Axe. This is a really good weapon to kind of take advantage of that rot and high damage. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the heavy Rotten Duelist Axe. You can throw any roar on it. I'm using Brogot's Roar. We have the Highland Axe for the passive. Any seal will do. We hit 51 poise. For talismans, we have the Axe Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Roar Medallion. We have the Erdtree's Favorite +2, Green Burst Crystal tier. Then we have the Faith tier. Let's get into stats for this build. By the way, for this one, also we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. We have 60 Vigor, we have 70 Strength, 25 Faith with the Faith tier so we can do some buffs, 30 Endurance because we do have a decent amount of weight and we have 51 Poise, 23 Mind. And this is a well-rounded build that you can do on a lot of weapons, but you can take advantage of the Rot procs with the Rotten Duelist Axe with the multiplier as far as the roars go. Next build here is the Darkmoon Battlemage build. The Darkmoon Greatsword is, well, great. It's super powerful and FP friendly too. Here at rune level 150, we'll take on the Sleeping Godskin duo with the Darkmoon Greatsword. This is a From Software staple, of course, and likely a favorite by the majority of the player base for good reason. It's reliable and the Ash scales purely with your intelligence stat. This is my go-to lately as my mage sidearm and one of the easiest ways to run through the game. Second to the Blasphemous Blade, this takes the number 2 overall spot for powerful weapons in Elden Ring. If you want, on top of faith buffs, you can add the Jellyfish Shield for 20% more damage, one of the few ashes in Elden Ring that can use the shield for the boost. This is truly a fantastic build that's been battle tested many times. So many people at this point have used the Darkmoon Greatsword. By the way, this is a solid setup for you at 150. I did this on a rune level 150 character, but overall, the Darkmoon Greatsword is so reliable, incredibly powerful, and it's awesome to use too. By the way, on New Game Plus 7, the Godskin duo has around 40,000 combined HP, so they do have a lot of health, but even so, with the Darkmoon Greatsword and a mix of Terra Magica and whatnot, we're able to do a ton of damage with the beams here. They're chargeable, by the way, and can be boosted by the Godfrey icon as well. Speaking of which, I'm curious in the comments section what your favorite mage sidearm is. What's the main thing that you use as a mage for your sidearm? Not the main thing that you're casting in terms of spells and stuff, but basically, what weapon are you using where you're kind of taking advantage of an intelligence-based Ash of War with your mage setup to kind of turn it into a battle mage? The top 2 for me are probably Darkmoon Greatsword and Death's Poker, but I do really enjoy Wing of Astal too. That's another powerful one that is very much better for bigger targets though than smaller targets. Death's Poker has a really high damage ceiling, damage cap. As far as the Darkmoon Greatsword, probably the most reliable of the bunch. Let's get new equipment. For equipment, we have the Darkmoon Greatsword, preferably plus 10. We're using the Carrion Regal Scepter. We have the Spellblade set on because it boosts this by 8% in total. Any seal will do. Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, Magic Tier, Fate Tier. Let's get into stats. And on this one, we're using Golden Vow and Halashbiri to add some faith buffs to it on top of Terra Magica. We have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 21 Endurance, we have 60 Intelligence, and then we got to 33 Faith with the Faith tier, so basically we can do all the buffs we like as well. The next build here is a fun one too. Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear is incredibly overpowered. Sure, you have to stand there for it to do the most damage, but the damage ceiling is ridiculous. This does immense fire and bleed damage and has solid range too. The Ash, Bloodboon Ritual, is stupid good in the best way. Poor Gideon here can't handle the heat, quite literally, and goes down super fast. This is one I recommend for those that just want to do damage without having to think too much. It really does become that easy once you know how to time it right. It's one of those things that takes a little bit to time it, but once you learn how to time it and get through the whole Ash, it can do an insane amount of damage. One of the most powerful bleed weapons in the game. Let's get into equipment for this one. For equipment, we have Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear plus 10. We have the Dragon Communion Seal, because why not? It scales with Arcane. We have the White Mask, hit 51 poise. Fire Scorpion Charm. Ritual Swords Talisman. Shard of Alexander. Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have the Fire tier, Faith tier for buffs. Let's get into stats. For our stats, and we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, by the way, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 20 Endurance. We went for 30 Strength. We have 60 Arcane, because the Ash of War, that fire damage, that bleed procs, all that stuff that you're going to get from it is primarily going to come from your Arcane stat. So two-handing it, we have 45 Strength, essentially, and 60 Arcane for a well-rounded build. The final build on this list is one I've been using a ton lately, and that is Ice Spear. Ice Spear is a very good Ash of War, but strangely it scales more with dexterity than magic. In past videos, I kept trying to figure out the proper stats and the perfect weapon to use it, and in this video, I finally came up with great stats and the Guardian Sword Spear. This ultimately gave me an excellent combination of having a dexterity build with minimal intelligence investment and being able to get a ton of damage out of Ice Spear, which by the way, as you can see there, it actually does posture damage too, and you can proc Frost at a range. This is a very powerful Ash of War. Here on Beast Clergyman Amalekith, we've got the dexterity part down well in combination with the Sword Spear. This amounts to very good damage with the chance to proc Frost, as I mentioned, at a range. This is a very powerful combination, and it can make a lot of the fights in the game significantly easier. That being said, this is probably one of the most reliable Ashes in the game, and one I continue to enjoy more and more each time I use it. I've never had a very difficult time running Ice Spear, and the Guardian Sword Spear's amazing base damage for multiple affinities makes it even better. This is one, by the way, that's definitely recommended by your average gamer, and one that can be something you can invest into if you're looking for a dexterity build. There's not a lot of reason to go crazy with the magic stat here, so put most of it into dexterity and the returns will be awesome. By the way, I know a lot of everyone out there that's watching this video, as far as the videos go lately, we're going to keep it mostly fun with the occasional overpowered stuff, but I'm curious as to what you're looking for in DLC too, so be sure to comment that as well, what you want to see in DLC when that comes out, hopefully early in 2024. For me, I'd love to see like trick weapons and stuff like Bloodborne. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's something that they're going to throw in there. I would take a boss rush mode. That would be really cool. Even if it was like the Chalice dungeons. I know a lot of people weren't a fan of those, but for me, I found that it kind of makes the end game a little bit better and it gives you something else to farm. So something like that would be cool too. Now here, we're going to get new equipment for this build and setup. For our last build on this list, we have the Guardian Sword Spear in Cold Affinity with Ice Spear on it. We had the Spellblade set because it will boost this. Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. We had the Magic tier, Faith tier. Let's get into stats. We're using Golden Vow and Halashbiri, and we went for 60 Vigor, 60 Dexterity for a well-rounded build. We also have 23 Mind. I didn't go for a lot of Endurance because I didn't really need it here. You probably should put maybe a couple more points back in there if you're not going to use the Spellblade set, which is rather light. Thanks for watching this one, as this was a really fun one to make based on the overpowered builds I've been running lately. Elden Ring is an amazing game, and with DLC likely early next year, it's better to be ready now more than ever. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy hanging out and talking about games, and check out the Discord in the description below as well. Have an amazing day and a wonderful week. Everybody who's out there, I hope you have the best week possible, and I will catch you guys soon.